Hey, Agape students. Hope you guys are doing great today. We're just so glad to have you join with us online again as we continue in our series today. Also, just want to welcome in anybody else that might be watching who maybe Agape is not your home, but you've just chosen to spend some time with us today. We're just so grateful to have you here with us. But we are in part 2 of our current series called Seeing Clearly. And pretty much the heart of this message, this series, is trying to just kind of get our mindset, our thoughts, our focus, and our perspective back to the heart of God in this unconventional time. And so last week we talked about Joseph, and we kind of went over the story of Joseph from Genesis chapter 37 to 42. We went through the timeline of everything happening to him. And remember, we talked about all the ups and downs that Joseph went through, but eventually, God fulfilled the promise that he gave him at the very beginning of the message that we talked about. And so pretty much the heart behind that message and just kind of getting started on seeing clearly is that through all of our ups and downs, God has a plan for our life. Well, how can we carry that on? How can we continue that? Well, today we're going to be talking about a man named Peter and about something incredible that he did when he walked on water. And so going back to last week a little bit, we talked about, God has a plan, and, we were challenged to continue to just trust in God's plan and just continue to live our lives for Him no matter whether we're going through ups or downs or whatever it might be. Like, God has a plan, and we want to live for that plan. Well, sometimes that's a lot easier said than done, right? Sometimes it's kind of scary to live out a plan that we don't really know the ending to. Sometimes it's kind of scary to live out the calling that God has put on our life because we don't really know exactly how we'll get there. There's this thing that is called uncertainty that kind of sets in. And as human beings, uncertainty is not always, very rarely actually, the most comfortable thing. It's not comfortable to be uncertain about anything. And so tonight, a big topic of what we're going to be talking about is just trusting God and how trusting Him can help us see Him more clearly. And so I know, as a student pastor, a student ministry director, and someone just who's in ministry in general, somebody that's following the call that God has put on their life, someone who's, living my life for Him, I understand that my thinking should always be, I know that the future will always be uncertain, but I also know that God is faithful, no matter what the future holds. Like, I know that should be my thought process, but that's not easy, Like, it's not always easy to have that thought process. And so we deal with this thing called trust. And a lot of times we have broken trust in our lives. We have things that have happened to where we don't trust other people for certain things. Sometimes other stuff has happened to where now we don't trust God because we're blaming Him. Here's the thing about trust, though, is that it is the foundation of every relationship and the keystone on which everything else rests. And yet trusting God doesn't come naturally or easily, which is kind of crazy to think, right? Like, if trust is the very foundation of a relationship with God, then why isn't it just easy to have it? People say all the time, oh, just trust in God, trust in His plan, trust in His ways. Well, a lot of times when I hear that, I'm like, yeah, like, I get it, I know I should, but it's a little difficult right now. If you just understood what I'm going through, it's not always the easiest thing to trust. For example, I've seen in movies, I've seen in TV shows, I've even had real life experiences where I've heard people be like, they're in a relationship with somebody, or maybe they're friends with somebody and they get hurt, or something happens and they get hurt, or they go through some pain, and they finally get to the point where they've had the fight, they've had the argument, and now they're like, you know what, I forgive you, but I can't trust you. I forgive you, but I don't trust them anymore. And I think a lot of times we put that on God as well. Like, a lot of times we go through life and something bad has happened and it's kind of kicked us while we're down. Or maybe we're in a relationship and we get broken up with. Or maybe someone close to us passes away or something. And now, instead of just trusting that God still has a plan through those things, now the enemy has kind of made his way into our mind and has now gotten us to blame God for those very things. But He still has a plan. You see, I could give you all these motivational and inspirational scriptures to trust God. And the thing is, it's biblical to do so. It's biblical to trust Him. It says in the Bible to trust Him. Proverbs 3, verse 5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. Isaiah 26:4. Trust in the Lord forever, for the Lord God is an everlasting rock. Jeremiah 17:7. Blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord, whose trust is the Lord. Psalm 62:8. Trust in him at all times, O people. Pour out your heart before him. God is a refuge for us. Psalm 56:3. When I'm afraid, I put my trust in you. So these are just five scriptures that I bring to your attention about. Like, the Bible literally says to trust God. Like, that is something that we should do, right? But it's a lot easier said than done. And even though it's biblical, just because it's biblical doesn't make it easy. It's hard to trust sometimes. It's hard to trust people. It's hard to trust loved ones. It's hard to trust God sometimes. And that's just our own human nature, because we tend to try to be so in control of our own lives that putting our trust or our dependence on anybody else or anything else is really just kind of uncomfortable. And when we do that, we enter into that place of uncertainty. So even though those scriptures that I mentioned are motivational and they're inspirational and they're true, it's still hard to put our trust in God. So why is it important that we actually live those scriptures out? And how can trusting in him improve our relationship with him? Tonight we're going to be talking about how to embrace the uncertainty in our lives by using a story of a man named Peter. And before we get into this story, I want to just go ahead and shed some light on there's one of the biggest obstacles, which I kind of just hit on a little bit, but one of the biggest obstacles to embracing the uncertainty in our own lives is our own natural need to be in control. I can speak for myself when I say it's hard for me to depend on other people. It's hard for me to put my trust in other people. I've always kind of been that guy that, even if I have a team of people built up around that'll help me, it's hard for me not to just do it all on my own. Because I know that if I do it myself, I know how it's going to get done, I know when it's going to get done, I know what it's going to look like, I know what the end result's going to be like. But when I live like that, I'm missing out on just the power of what it means to trust my team and just let them do what God's called them to do and let them use the abilities that God has given them to use to help me out. There's power in trust. And so let's get into this story about Peter. Matthew chapter 14, verses 22 through 31. It says, immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid. Lord, if it's you, Peter replied, tell me to come to you on the water. Come, he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, Lord, save me. Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You of little faith, he said, why did you doubt? That's probably one of my favorite stories in the Bible. And just a little, fun fact. I got saved at 17. Probably a few years after that, I was in Gatlinburg during Christmas with my family. We went up there for a weekend and just kind of had some family time. And I remember I was in the cabin one night, and I was kind of just doing some reading and some research, and I came across this story. And by that time, I'd been saved a couple of years, but I didn't know that Peter had walked on water. Up until that point, I thought Jesus was the only one that walked on water. And so I read this story, and I'm like, yo, this regular dude, this disciple, this guy, just this regular human being, walked on water. And it's kind of crazy because if you think about it in today's terms, if you saw somebody walking on water, it'd be pretty dope, But Peter did something that, to my knowledge, no one else in the history of the world has ever done except Jesus, that I know of. And it's just that's That's just really kind of cool. But there's a lot in that story that we're about to unpack, and what it really means to trust and how that helps our own lives. So let's go back to verse 27. See if I can get to it right here. Verse 27. It says, "But Jesus said immediately to them, 'Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid.'" So the disciples are in this boat on this lake, and Jesus had kind of gone off, and now he's walking on the lake to them, and they see him, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, it's a ghost." But I love how it said immediately, Jesus says, "Take courage, don't be afraid, it's me." I love that word immediately. He didn't hesitate, he didn't wait for him to kind of plunder around, he didn't wait for him to kind of try to figure out a plan to get away. In their fear, in their worry, in their scaredness, Jesus immediately comforted them. And I think he does the same to us. So now let's fast forward to verses 29 through 30. Where Peter's saying, "Lord, if it's you," he says, "tell me to come to you on the water." So just right there, that's very unique in the sense of Peter is in a boat on water, and he's saying, "God, if this is you, tell me to come out here to you." Me personally, I probably would have come up with any other thing to try to figure out if that was Jesus other than saying, "Hey, tell me to come to you on this water." Because physically I know I can't walk on water. But spiritually, with him, Peter knew. Peter had been hanging out with this guy. He knew the power that was in him, and he knew that if that really was him and he said to come to him, he knew he'd be able to do whatever it is he needed to do to get to Jesus. You see, Peter's strength lied in what he was focused on. Peter's strength lies in what he was focused on. As we continue, verse 30. So Peter's on the water. He's looking at Jesus. He's walking on water. A human being walking on water. But then verse 30 says, "When he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, 'Lord, save me.' But when he saw the wind, he was afraid." See, the whole point of this message series that we're in is called Seeing Clearly, and how we can shift our mindset and our thoughts and our focus and our perspective back to the heart of God. Trusting in him helps us see clearly. When Peter was fully trusting in Jesus and was on the water and was just face to face with him saying, I'm right here with you on the water. I'm good. But when he started looking at everything else around him, when he started looking at the wind and the waves and all the stuff that was crashing around, when he started focusing on everything else, then the power that Jesus had bestowed upon him in that moment, in a sense, had kind of faded away, because now Peter's not in tune with Jesus. He's not connected with Jesus. Now he's more focused on everything else around him. And how often do we do that? We have these moments where we're just in tune with God, and we're worshiping every night, and we're reading our word every night, and we're praying every night, and we're living for him, and we're serving, and we're doing all the stuff that we're supposed to do, and we're living a biblical life. And then our boyfriend or our girlfriend breaks up with us. Or one of our friends picks on us or says something mean about us, and now the enemy starts flooding our mind with all these negative thoughts. And now, when we used to be just going after Jesus and we were just face to face with him, but now we're in a place of, I'm focused on this relationship instead. Or I'm focused on this person over here instead. Or I'm focused on my parents being mad at me over here instead. Our power lies in what we are focused on. Our vision lies in what we're focused on. But what I love about the story is that even when Peter started focusing on everything else, so he started to sink, right? Because he started focusing on everything that wasn't Jesus. He started to sink. And so he started to sink, and he said, "Lord, save me." You see, Peter, he started to sink. He knew what he had. He knew he had lost it. And now he knew that he needed it back. So he said, Lord, save me. He reached out his hand. And what I love is that verse 31 says, immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. And just kind of asked him like a little question. He's like, you have little faith. Why did you doubt? Almost like, hey, man, what are you doing? we were just walking on water together, man. We're having the time of our lives. And now you start focusing on this and other stuff. Like, what you doing? Why are you doubting me? When you had to trust in me, you were walking on the water, right? Why'd you start doubting? Why are you starting to focus on all this other stuff? Continue to trust in me and just see how far I can take you. Continue to trust in Jesus and just see how far he can take you. I love it though, because it says immediately Jesus reached out his hand. Peter was with Jesus, man, walking on the water, going after him, pursuing him, focused on him. Then he starts focusing on everything else, and he starts to sink. And Peter's like, oh crap, like I know I'm not where I need to be right now, because if I was where I needed to be, I'd be on top of the water and not under it. So he reaches out his hand, Lord, help me. And Jesus immediately grabs his hand. He didn't hesitate. He didn't sit there. He didn't stand there for a little bit and just be like, nah, you gonna pay for what you did. Nah, you took your trust off of me? Forget it. You're going to have to just sit there for a little bit. You're going to have to drown. I don't know. Nah. It says immediately he reached out his hand and he grabbed him. And I believe he'll do the same for you. Maybe you're in a place right now where mentally, physically, emotionally, you're just like sinking. And maybe today is the day that you need to just call out to him. Just say, God, I need you. I know that I was once in a place where I was just pursuing you and focused on you and everything was great, but all this other stuff is starting to happen, and to be honest, my thoughts and my mindset and my focus and everything is kind of just shifted to all this other stuff, and I'm sorry, but I'm just human and I can't help it, and whatever that might be for you, I don't know. But I have faith and trust that if you call out on his name today, he will pick you up and he'll bring you back into the boat with him. And so as we kind of come to a close tonight, the message was short, a little shorter than last week's. But as we come to a close tonight, I wanted to give you 3 ifs about this process of stepping out of the boat. This process of putting your trust and your faith in Jesus and not in all the other things in the world. The first one is very simple. If you want to walk on water, you've got to step out of the boat. It's very simple. If you want to walk on water, you've got to step out of the boat. So whatever boat you've been in, whether it's anger or fear or depression or lust or pride or anxiety, whatever it might be, maybe it's a boat of just being ticked off, that you're in quarantine, you can't go hang out with your friends. Maybe you're in a boat of just self-isolation and depression and loneliness. If you don't want to stay in that boat, you've got to step out of it. You've got to step out of it. The second thing is that if you consume your life with more of Jesus and less of the distractions around you, you will begin to see him more clearly. If you consume your life with more of Jesus and less of the distractions around you, you'll begin to see him more clearly. And so just envision this. Envision, Peter, like he's on the water and he's face to face with Jesus and he's walking on the water and he's living in the power of Jesus right then in that moment. He's consuming his life with Jesus. But then as soon as the wind and the waves started to pick up, he started focusing on all that other stuff. And he started to sink. And I can guarantee you that his vision of what Jesus looked like was a lot better when he was above water than when he was under it. You see, if we consume our life with more of Jesus, with more of his word, more time spent in prayer, more time spent in worship, more time engaging in relationship with him, then we will see him more and more clearly than if we continue to have all of our focus and all of our attention on all of these other distractions going on right now. The third thing is that if you stay stuck in the boat, you'll miss out on the water, and you'll never experience the power that comes from trusting in Jesus. I'll say that again. If you stay stuck in the boat, you'll miss out on the water, and you'll never experience the power that comes from trusting in Jesus. So pretty much, if you stay stuck in this place that you've been in, this place of self-isolation, this place of depression, this place of fear, this place of anger, this place of frustration, if you stay stuck in those places, you'll miss out on the water. You'll miss out on the experience of just getting to walk on water with Jesus. You'll miss out on the experience of just getting to have a relationship with Him and just live in trust with Him. Just be face to face with Him and just live in that power with Him. And if you miss out on that, you'll never get to experience the true fullness of power that comes from trusting in Him in the first place. You've got to step out of the boat. You've got to step out of the boat. So as we kind of wrap up, I know that at the beginning of the message I talked a lot about trust and how it's not always easy. But hopefully, through this message, you've seen that, no, it's not always easy, but is it worth it when it comes to Jesus? Yes. Will He let us down? No. Will He pick us up when we let ourselves down? Absolutely. There's a quote that I love from Martin Luther King Jr. It says, faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase. And so I know the word here is faith. It's taking the first step. We've been talking a lot about trust, but I kind of view trust and faith in a way they're kind of like one and the same. And so in a sense, trust is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase. And so I encourage you tonight, take a step out of the boat. I don't know what the walk on the water is going to look like. I don't know what kind of wind and waves are going to come. I don't know what lake you're going to be in. I don't know what it's going to look like. And maybe you don't either. But you'll never know unless you take that step. And the one thing that may be stopping you from becoming the person that God wants you to be is taking a step of faith from the place that you're in right now. One small thing that might be stopping you from being the person that God wants you to be is just taking a simple step of faith from the place that you're in right now. So I want to challenge you today. Step out of the boat. Don't let that keep holding you back from the destiny that God has for you. Don't let that keep holding you back from trusting in Him and relying on Him and depending on Him. And I can guarantee you that once you truly let your guard down and trust in Him wholeheartedly, you will begin to see more and more clearly every day who He is and what He has for your life. And you'll begin to live out the purpose that He has for you. And you'll begin to have more freedom and more joy and more peace in your life, because now your trust is in something greater than in yourself or in the other things around you. Your trust is in Him. So tonight, as we come to a close, I just want to pray for you. Maybe you're listening to this message and you say, you know what, Hagen, I'm just completely lost. I've never stepped out of the boat, but I want to. I want to accept Christ into my life for the first time. I want to take a step of faith and trust in Him. It's awesome. Or maybe you're in this place and you have accepted Him into your life, and maybe lately you've just kind of been going through some mess. Maybe you're just weary, maybe you're tired, maybe you're just worn out. Maybe your vision's kind of skewed because you've been focusing on all this other stuff. And you say, you know what? I'm in the process of sinking. I'm not doing too well, but I don't want to stay here. I want to step out of the boat and trust in what He has for me. It's awesome. Or maybe you're in this place and you're just dry, like just dried out. Maybe you're just burnt out. Maybe you've been trying, you've been pursuing, and you just haven't really heard much from him. Maybe you're just in a deserted place right now, it feels like. Maybe you just haven't felt God in a long time. And you just say, you know what? I just want to call out to him. Because I believe that at this moment, if you call out to him, immediately he will reach out his hand and he will grab you. And he will take care of you. And so if that's anybody that's watching right now, I just want to take a moment right here and just give you an opportunity to receive and respond. And so if you're lost, if you want to accept Christ for the first time, or maybe you haven't felt him a whole lot lately and you just want to cry out to him, or maybe you just realize you're in the point of life where you're just kind of sinking and you don't want to stay there. And you want to spiritually take a step of faith and say, I trust in you, God. I trust in what you have for me. If that's you in this place, if that's you right now, I just want to give you a moment to respond and receive. Thank you, Jesus. Father, I just thank you for this message. I thank you for this day. I thank you for the students that are watching right now. I thank you for whoever it is that's watching right now, God. I just pray that your word resonate in the hearts and the lives and the souls of the people that are watching this. I pray that they've been encouraged, God, to step out of the boat and to live in faith with you. I pray that they've been encouraged to trust you. Maybe they've been hurt in the past. Maybe they've been hurt before by other people. Maybe they've been blaming you for things that weren't really your fault. But I pray tonight that trust be renewed. I pray that you just continue to show yourself to them in supernatural ways, and that you continue to fill them with peace and love and joy and happiness. And I pray that you continue to just overflow your presence into their atmosphere. God, I just thank you for today. And I just pray that whoever has watched this message, whether they accepted you for the first time, or just cried out to you for the first time in a long time, I pray that you just do a move in them and that they'll never be the same. So in your mighty and powerful name we pray. We just pray that as we continue to go in this series, that we continue to seek you more, that we continue to see you more clearly, that you continue to show yourself to us in supernatural ways. In your mighty and powerful name we pray. We love you. We trust you. Amen. Amen. Hey, Agape students, it's so good having you here again with us. Hope you enjoyed the message. Hope you got something out of it. I'm looking forward to doing this again for week 3. We'll be right back here next week, and we'll do it again. See y'all later.